Janora was a sweetheart. She was funny and witty.
She was my best friend growing up because I didn't have brothers or sisters. My mother and I did a lot together. She was the quintessential baseball mom, for sure. She was at every practice, every game. My father coached the team, but my mother was the glue, and she was my biggest fan.
We spent all evening looking for a prom dress. And we got back to Janora's house, and she got out of the car and went to the back door. And she came through the house and went to the front door and opened the door and stepped out on the step and waved bye to me. So I went home. I would never have guessed that would be the last time I'd ever see her.
Glenda and Carrie head for home. Troy Stevens arrives back at his mother's house half an hour later.
I got home after school about 10 o'clock. When I walked into the house that night, from the doorway, I could see her laying in the floor. The closer I got, the more vivid it became. I saw my mother just brutally, just butchered. I backed up into the kitchen to go use the phone and got an ambulance on the way.
We were the first car there, so we got out of our car, walked up and approached that front door, and we remained quiet so we could listen and see if we could hear a fight or a disturbance inside.
Janora was lying on the floor of the kitchen wearing a maroon house robe. There was a large amount of blood. The TV was on in the adjoining family room. There was a kitchen and a bar, and it looked like the incident happened there. There were some broken pieces of a large knife, which indicates that knife hit something hard and it broke. So that struck me as really brutal, a lot of force. This knife looked like it came from a kitchen drawer, so maybe this wasn't a premeditated murder. On the hallway wall to the left, there was a couple large blood smears, which indicated to me that the victim came in contact with that wall, probably trying to get out the door.
She almost got out. Do you know how many times I've thought about, well, what if she had? She's that far away.
The autopsy showed that Janora was stabbed almost 30 times. It was all over her body. Her neck was cut open in a huge gash.
And what it tells me is that there's a lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of very personal.
Next, Huff focuses on investigating those closest to Janora, starting with her son, Troy.
We saw Troy very soon after the discovery, and his reactions were consistent with somebody just discovering a tragedy. So I didn't come away thinking he was a viable suspect. About, I'm wanting to say 1 or 2 in the morning, Phil, the husband, arrived home. I spoke to him and found out that he had come home from a fishing trip. Phil's demeanor was demanding answers, what happened to my wife. But I don't recall Phil being very candid about their relationship. In early August, I saw a couple girls sitting in a car down the block, smoking marijuana. And I asked them, do you remember when that lady got murdered? And they said, oh yeah, that night, we were sitting down here and this guy came walking up to our car. asked us to give him a ride somewhere. They said for some reason he had on a light blue jean jacket and it was buttoned all the way up. And that was very odd because it was so warm and humid. They saw some scratches and marks on his neck that made them think he'd been into a fight. And this really interested me. Hey, we're on to something. We've got a path here, so let's go with it. They told me the guy's name was Quentin Barnes.
Quentin Barnes was a teenager. He had some background in some minor crimes, either drugs or property crimes, but no crimes of violence that we knew at that time. He was living on and off next door to Janora Stevens. His sister, Victoria Barnes, lived in the house next door, and he would stay sometime with her and her boyfriend. She defended her brother and said that there's no way that he could have been involved in such a horrific or brutal crime.
Ultimately, I figured out where Quentin was staying, and I put together an affidavit for a search warrant to search for any evidence, specifically for a jean jacket. I found an unkept apartment, and I went into a closet, and there was a light blue jean jacket laying on the floor. When the jacket was analyzed, they found a hair that was brown. It was dyed, as was Janora's hair.
The analysis of the hair came back that it was not Janora's hair. It wasn't Quentin Barnes either.
I wasn't happy with the process. I just felt that I didn't have people that really were up to date on the science.
Despite the test results, Detective Huff's gut tells him Quentin Barnes is somehow involved in Janora Stevens' murder. After Mike Huff completes his supervisor training, he's promoted to head up Tulsa PD's homicide unit and picks up where he left off on Janora's murder. Huff had never been happy with the first analysis of the hair found on Quentin Barnes' jacket, so he requests a closer forensic examination.
At that point in time, the Tulsa Police Department lab had hired a forensic analyst who had previously worked for the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, and it completely overruled the first hair analysis. Yes, there is a match on the hair. Janora's hair was on the jacket. Fibers were found that matched the robe that Janora Stevens was wearing when she died. And blue fibers were found under her fingernails that matched the type of fibers that were in the jean jacket that was in Quentin Barnes' closet.
Detective Huff re-interviews Quentin's sister, Victoria.
She said that Quentin made comments to her admitting guilt, that he killed her and will never find the knife. So I convinced the DA to file the charges, to issue an arrest warrant. I found him at his home. I said, Quentin, you're under arrest for murder.
Barnes admits to breaking into Janora's house on that night, back in May 1987.
So Quentin Barnes admitted to being there, but being there with his sister.
I seen my sister pick up the knife after they started wrestling around.
He pointed the finger at his sister entirely.
I did not kill her. My sister did.
There's sperm in Janora's throat. There's no way you can shift that blame to Victoria.
Barnes never quite confesses to the murder on videotape, but his story is so implausible, prosecutors are confident of a conviction.
Quentin Barnes was found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury came back with a recommendation of life without parole. There was a strong sentiment in the room that death was an appropriate punishment in this case, but you need 12, and there was somebody in the room that was not willing to make that step.
In the end, Quentin Barnes takes that final step by himself.
A couple days after trial, Quentin Barnes took his own life by overdosing on pills in the Tulsa County Jail. Ultimately, we were asking for the death penalty, and we got it.